Hey, welcome to Taylor's Trick Taking Table. I'm Table, and today we'll be doing a last name reveal. I know everyone, after I mentioned my last name was German, was just clamoring in the comments, do a last name reveal, and okay. So my last name is Reiner, and it will come into play a little bit later. But the reason I bring it up is because at the end of Germany June here, we're moving into a new month, so July, where the theme is to lie. So it's going to be trick-taking games where the first mechanism, trick-taking, is going to be combined with a second mechanism. In this case, it's going to be Push Your Luck. And the game we're covering is Voodoo Prince by Reiner Knizia. And cards on the table here, take this with a grain of salt because I co-designed this with my co-designer, Benizia Knizia. Great guy, loves bow ties. You might have seen him. And you know, we like to design a lot of different games together, you know, ranging from like auction games to different auction games. And what we were trying to do with Voodoo Prince, what the hook is you're pushing your luck to take tricks as late as possible. Because once you take 3 tricks, you're out of the round. But once you do take those 3 tricks, you get points per trick from everyone else on the table. So if you take 3 right away, you're going to get 0 points. So you're trying to go as last as possible. But if you are the last person to take 3 tricks, you only get your trick amount. So you might only get 1 or 2 points. So you're trying to push your luck to go as late as possible, but not too late. You don't want to be the last one. Wonderful concept. Let's go to the table and I'll show you how to play. The deck in Voodoo Prince is numbered 0 through 15 in 5 suits. Depending on the player count, you'll cut out some cards. Here we have the game set up for 3 players. So again, depending on the player count, the hand size will be different, but at 3, each player is going to get 13 cards. The rest are then just set aside, and then the final part of setup is you're going to take these 5 suit cards that represent the 5 different suits in the game, you're going to shuffle them, and one is going to be turned face up randomly, and this will be the trump suit for the first hand. The dealer starts the first trick, so let's say it's skeleton hand here, and they'll lead to the trick anything they want to play. And in Voodoo Prince, you have to follow suit. So when it comes to the candy cigarettes here, they have to play a black card. Maybe they play that 2 black. And then finally, when it comes to Hamburglar here, since they don't have any black in their hand, they can play whatever they want. If they were going to play yellow, like if they played that yellow 2, they would win the trick because yellow just trumps everything else. They'd collect the trick and then lead to the next trick. In Voodoo Prince, certain cards have certain symbols on them. So like the 7 here has this torn card, or maybe the 0 here has this lightning bolt. And so what they mean is if you win a trick with any of the torn cards, so those are the 7s and the 5s in the game, you will split the trick into 2 tricks. So say if Hamburglar here led with a yellow of 7, Skeleton followed suit with a 4, and then the candy cigarettes decided to play a non-yellow card because they don't have any, like this 2 pink. If you win with one of the splits, this actually gets split into 2 tricks. So Hamburglar here would split this trick. So they didn't just take 1 trick, they split it into 2. So now they're at 3. And at 3 players, once you get 4 tricks, you're out for the round. So Hamburglar is dangerously close to ending early. The other symbol on the cards in the game is this lightning bolt symbol, and that's found on the 0s. And what that means is that the 0 will be the highest card of that suit. So in a 3-player game, it's the 10. So coming to the skeleton's hand here, they have the 10 yellow. So if they were to play this, and of course Lucky Lights doesn't have any yellow, so they just play that. Usually the highest number wins of the trump suit, then highest of the lead suit. But in this case, since the 0 of the winning suit and the highest, so the 10 at 3, was also played, then the 0 actually wins instead of the 10. If this was the 9 would have won. And why that's bad for Hamburglar here is because they just won their 4th trick. And so when you win your 4th trick or 3rd trick at different player counts, you actually look out at the table and see all the tricks that have won by other players, and you get that many points. So the bad situation is Hamburglar gets 0 points. If they hadn't have rushed that so quick and Skeleton Hand had won a couple tricks and Lucky Lights had won also a trick, Hamburglar would have actually gotten 3 points because they add up the total of tricks won by other players. But after a player has hit their limit, they're actually out for the round, and the trick play just continues on with the remaining players. So jumping along, maybe Skeleton Hand wins 1 more, and Lucky Lights wins 1 more, and then Skeleton Hand wins their 4th. Since they got out not last, Skeleton Hand will get 4 plus 2, they'll get 6 points. The sad thing is, if you're the last person in the round, you only get trick points based on the number of tricks you've won, so Lucky Lights would only get 2 points here. And when there's only one person left, that triggers the end of the round. You'll take all the cards back up, shuffle them, and redeal. After the first round, Trump actually isn't random, so you take the person who is left, and that person is going to be the start player for the next round, but also, after they look at the hand, they get to choose which suit is going to be the Trump suit. So maybe Lucky Lights looks at their hand, and they think, oh, I have a lot of blue, maybe I'll make blue Trump. They decide what that is, and then they'll lead to the next round. And no matter the player count, you play 5 rounds, whoever has the most points wins. So that is Voodoo Prince, and I love this game. I know I say that a lot, I kind of talk in hyperbole, but I have to say this is probably one of, if not the best, intro trick takers. I was introduced to trick taking through Hearts, and it's a pretty good intro trick taker. There's no bidding, there's no trumping, so you can kind of learn the trick taking elements pretty easily. I think sometimes though, in Hearts, even though it's point avoidance, and there's definitely tension and some fun moments, especially with the Queen of Spades, but there's hands, there's tricks of Hearts where there's just not too much to it. You're like, okay, we're playing spades, or we're playing clubs for a little bit, we're playing, diamonds for a little bit. But in Voodoo Prince, the fact that you're trying to get a fair amount of tricks, but not break that threshold and delay it, makes it to where every trick has this building tension. At the start, it's like, okay, you can get some tricks, but they have meaning to them. And when it builds and builds and builds, especially when it's down to just 2 players, every single hand has a perfect arc. It has those like highlighting moments where, sometimes you win with a 5 or a 7 and it splits the card, or the zeros beat the 15s. It has those small little, blips of interesting moments middle of the hand. But the fact that it always is building and always leads to just like an amazing finale just makes this so interesting to new trick takers, or even veteran trick takers. I feel like that arc is just what sells it. And after the first hand, everyone I've showed it to, at least, has always been excited to play the next one right away. I know I said that the second mechanism of Voodoo Prince is push your luck, and I think one could argue that don't a lot of trick takers have push your luck, especially if you're bidding on a higher number of tricks you think you can win, probably more so than your hand's good for. But I would say that from the start of every hand, the push your luck is just ever present. And I actually really love the push your luck here because it comes through in the players. And you can see someone who maybe is a little more gambly in Can't Stop, or like King of Tokyo, it will translate here more so than any other trick taker. I've played, pure push your luck games and then Voodoo Prince with the same people, and they're the same people during Voodoo Prince who will sit there with no tricks for a super long time because they just love that tension. Me, I kind of like to get a few tricks in early, so I kind of have an exit plan. But I love the fact that the push your luck comes through perfectly in the gameplay, and I don't think I've seen push your luck in other trick takers quite as well implemented as this one. I always love trick takers where the group and how they play changes the pace of the game. I've played where there's groups that like everything to be pretty balanced, where everyone's taking, 1 at a time, and then 2 at a time, and 3 at a time, and it's like everyone's on the same kind of clip. And then I've played with groups where there's like just 1 or 2 people who are nuts, and they'll either be on one side of the push your luck spectrum where they're just so risk averse they'll just take as many tricks as possible. And then on the other side, well, they'll just never take tricks and they'll always get burned, and that person just never kind of learns. And I love that in trick takers where the people's personality can come through in the gameplay. This is meant to be best at 5, and I love that because, usually trick takers are kind of at 4, but when you have such a game that is so group dependent, just a bigger group lends to so much variety and so much kind of flavor in the gameplay that I love this mix of a high player count game but also a high player dependent game. You get such interesting play sessions of it. Voodoo Prince was reprinted as Marshmallow Test by Game Riot recently, and I'll do a video that kind of compares them more, that might be a little bit more focused on those differences. But I will say that Voodoo Prince is the better product in my mind. It adds just a little bit to the powers of the cards and some of the rules that make it so it's a little bit more complex to help out people who are pretty familiar with trick taking, but still not lessen it or add too much of a barrier for beginners. But yeah, if I had to pick a version, it'd probably definitely be Voodoo Prince. So that is Voodoo Prince, and oh, I love it so much. It's my go-to at 5. It's my go-to for new players. Honestly, it's my go-to for just having a quick trick taker. The rules are light. You can kind of just get going, which is great. And Reiner Knizia is kind of just a master at rules where you read them and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this sounds really interesting. And then you play them and you're like, oh, whoa, this is very, very interesting. You know, it kind of opens up itself as the more you play. So it's possibly my favorite trick taker, one of my favorite trick takers ever. So of course I think it's going to get the seal, so. And thanks so much for watching.